Is there a push for that? Is it happening?
I think there's more and more people aware of that simply because the politics in the U.S. is becoming more polarized, right? If it's polarized, easy solution, right? You want to live your life that way, go. If you want to live your life a different way, go to another state, right? So it's the only way, I think, for the country to hold together.
What do you think of people who say end the Fed? It's not...
No, that's not a good idea. I mean, so...
Why not?
So
hasn't the Fed just insulated us from pain and error and mistakes in businesses? And if you decentralized banking, you talked about decentralization. If you decentralized banking, there was no Fed and there were no bailouts. The banks themselves would have to operate more responsibly and perhaps even not run such high fractional reserve ratios.
So I'll say this. So we have a central bank in the U.S. We didn't always have one. We had one. We developed one because it solved the problem that was recurring throughout time. Right? We always had these banking panics with the Fed. That's less of a case. I think that's a good thing. Same thing happened to many other countries. So it solves a legitimate problem. Now, the problems that you describe, I think, can be separated from ending the Fed. So you could have a Fed that's more limited. The Fed does hide some problems in the financial system, like you mentioned. For example, by willing to buy a lot of government debt, they keep interest rates low and, in a sense, encourage irresponsible spending. So that's not good. But then I think it's a hard question, because just think of it from the Fed's perspective. Something blows up in the financial markets, right? So should I intervene? Or should I just let it blow up, let the losses lie, and people, they'll learn their lesson, and there won't be, it's less likely to happen in the future. I think the temptation is always to just go in and save them, because politicians have election cycles today, and there's less human suffering in the short term, at least. So it's a hard question, but if you wanted to solve it, if you wanted to prevent the Fed from doing too much, I would just scale back its role. I wouldn't end it altogether, because that creates all the old problems that were there before the Fed appeared.
Obviously, this is a Bitcoin show. We don't have a Fed in the world of Bitcoin, but we have blow-ups.
Yeah.
We had FTX blow up. We've had BlockFi blow up. Celsius, a long time ago, we had Mt. Gox blow up. And what happens in those scenarios is that people get taught this very simple concept with Bitcoin: not your keys, not your Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, you can be self-sovereign. I don't know how much you know about Bitcoin. Do you know much?
No, I'm familiar.
Okay, so it's a bearer asset. You can hold your own keys and protect yourself. What happens is some people choose to use services where they trust their keys to somebody else. Somebody else holds their Bitcoin, and when they blow up, there's no Fed to bail out. It can't exist because there's no ability to print Bitcoin. Right. There is only 21 million. There are 19.5 million in circulation. And so what that means is that you're forced to become more responsible for your Bitcoin. And I, as a Bitcoiner, have become more responsible over time. Yeah? I have good security. I have good multi-sig solutions. I protect my Bitcoin. And I now don't take risks with my Bitcoin. I don't leave it in centralized services that I think are high risk. So because of that, I'm essentially insulating myself from other people's errors because I know that's coming. And so I worry that what's happened over time is that governments have tried more and more to insulate us from pain. And it's a bit like participation trophies when 8-year-olds are playing football. I don't want participation trophies. I want you to get the trophy if you win. And if you lose, you understand what defeat is and you look to get better. And I feel like it's the same with banking. It's that we shouldn't insulate people from pain so we get more responsible banks or more responsible financial products. But it's a very different world. But that's the world that's the only way the Bitcoin world can operate.
No, I agree with you. For example, if you're a big company, let's say you blow up, the corporate CEO, he still does fine. $1 million bonuses, it's faceless shareholders that get fleeced. Same thing for if you were a commercial bank. So, I mean, you could structure a system where, for example, if you are a CEO, maybe instead of having limited liability, maybe you have some personal liability. So you could structure the system to instill more accountability in it. That's not how we operate now, but I agree that would be a bigger improvement if we have the incentive structure right. Right now, I don't think the incentives are aligned for a lot of things.
Yeah. So what do you think of Bitcoin?
So I think Bitcoin is a fascinating asset. I know that people have done really well owning Bitcoin. What I'm worried about when I think of Bitcoin is that I'm pretty sure that in the future we're going to have a lot of CBDCs. And if you look at China as a template, they have their CBDCs being tested. What do they also do? They ban Bitcoin. So that could be a roadmap for many other countries. Roll out your own CBDC, no more other digital currencies. So I think that's a real risk that weighs on me when I think of it.
So you're concerned, highly concerned of CBDCs.
I think that is coming. Maybe not actually in the U.S. Maybe in other countries first, but that's definitely the trend.
Is that not a really bullish case for Bitcoin, though, to have a money outside of the system that you can spend on what you want with no limitations?
But at the same time, though, the government has all the tanks and all the guns, and if they don't want you to have Bitcoin, they can make a very persuasive case to not have any Bitcoin, or at the very least, reduce its adoption. And if you have less adoption, I think that really impacts how far it can grow and how much it'd be worth.
Would you be concerned about the like a CBDC rollout and what that means in terms of limiting where people can spend money?
Absolutely, it's a very terrifying prospect. It's a way for basically the ultimate centralization that we've been talking about. So we've been growing. The trend over the past many years has been to have more centralized power. CBDC is basically the perfect tool to have that. You could have some few small group of people in, let's say, the government just decide that, hey, maybe we don't want this guy spending money, let's say, going to the gas station anymore because we think the gas is bad for the environment, right? Maybe we don't want you to buy hamburgers anymore because cows, they create methane, it's bad for the environment. So it's I think it enables a lot of technologies like a social credit score and so forth that could be something that really unleash a nightmarish scenario that you would only see beforehand in movies, but is very much a reality.
Haven't they legislated that CBDCs cannot exist in Florida?
Yeah, I don't know what kind of power they have to.
They can't do it. They don't have the power to stop it.
I don't think so. I mean, do they not use Federal Reserve notes, right? So the money, the power, monetary powers reside in the central government, not in Florida. I mean, there's no Florida dollar, right?
I don't see a CBDC come into America under a Republican government.
That's great. It is ultimately a political decision. So when you look at the Federal Reserve Board, you could see that people who are more left-leaning, like former Vice Chair Lael Brainerd, CBDCs are great, right? You can bank all these unbanked people. It's such a great thing to do, except that that's complete nonsense because people who are unbanked say they're unbanked because they don't trust the banks. And if you don't trust the banks, obviously you don't want to have a Fed coin. So, but if you are more right-leaning, they don't think that's a good idea. But if you zoom out a bit, I think in the European Union, for example, they're all full steam ahead for CBDCs. That's what they're going to do. If you look at Japan, they're like, we don't want CBDCs. Part of it is because they have a really elderly population. You don't really want your 80-year-old grandma to be using a digital wallet, right? She doesn't know how, so they want to use cash. So that's not happening there. In the US, at the moment, it doesn't look like it's happening right now. But as you suggested, with the political change, that would be very different.
We almost want Bitcoin to get big enough, quick enough, so by the time they do want a CBDC, it's too late. They can't stop Bitcoin.
Maybe Florida adopts Bitcoin.
Maybe. Have you adopted Bitcoin, or are you just an observer?
So I don't have any Bitcoin.
You lost it in a boating accident.
So in the U.S., I'll note that I don't know. You guys probably don't file taxes in the U.S., but when you start filing taxes in the U.S. more recently, there's actually a special box on your tax form. Check it if you deal with any virtual currencies. That's new, right? So I get the sense that's a prelude for some kind of at least heightened scrutiny on people who deal in virtual currencies.
Yeah. I wish people would just leave us the fuck alone.